Hello, listeners, and thank you for listening to the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio podcast. As I have stated a few times, we are moving to Substack. I was hoping to make this move on the 1st of January, but it looks like we will be making this move as of today. So we will still be on Podbean until November 5th, but then we will be on Substack. I appreciate you listening, and you can find us on Substack at ZASRs3e15 Radio. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you like our season finale. Welcome to the end of the world, survivors. You're tuned in to the station, one of the last voices on the airwaves. I'm Harper, or as I've come to call myself, DJ Clueless, broadcasting from a radio station that somehow still hums with life. I'm no longer alone, but the work of growing food and establishing contact with others is endless. This is where we fight back, where we build back up again. I'll be your guide through the madness, sharing the locations of safe havens, theories and information about our new world, and the occasional existential crisis that comes with a zompocalypse. The world's gone dark, the dead outnumber the living, but many have started to rebuild some of what we've lost. The only real question is, what's next? Stick around if you're still alive. That song was Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. And yes, I do play it frequently. It is a favorite. Thank you for tuning in to the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio. This is Harper, your DJ Clueless, coming at you on this Halloween day. I don't know if you guys have any spooky plans, but we have done our best to find as much candy as we possibly can for, the kids we have here. And we're going to do a little bit of trick-or-treating. No zombies, no zombie makeup, for obvious reasons. But one of the things that has happened recently is we had some new people come to the station to stay. And one of them is a medium. And apparently before the zombie apocalypse, she was not a medium. But post-apocalypse, she is able to speak with the dead. Needless to say, she had a lot of people wanting her attention almost immediately. And I left her alone because, I wanted to give her space to settle in. I remember what happened with Mark, who could dream things into being, and how people's demands basically chased him away from us, and to the point where wherever he is now, he probably has a different name. So I did not want to disturb her, but she actually sought me out and told me that she had somebody that wanted to speak to me pretty much right away. And it was somebody who had been with her for the past few days, basically telling her how to get to me. And it was Mitch, and he wanted to talk to me, and most of that conversation is pretty private, but he wanted to let me know that he is okay where he is, which I think is a fairly standard message from mediums, isn't it? Oh, they're fine, they're happy. But she told me a lot of things that only he would know. And I can tell now very easily when someone's lying. I think it's part of the whole being a truth demon, to steal Violet's phrase. But she was telling me stuff that only he and I would know. Because that's how it is with couples. There's a lot of insider information that isn't shared with others, and she had all of that information. And I took it a lot harder than I thought. Um, I think I knew intellectually that he was gone. I think I was very well aware of the fact that he was no longer on this plane of existence, but I don't know. I think I had a little fantasy that somehow he survived. I had this little fantasy that, after he helped me escape, that he went back in and helped other people escape, or he pulled a Walking Dead maneuver and hid underneath some dead bodies, that he somehow managed to survive the attack and get out. But that is not the case. He helped me get away and was pretty much um, instantly got by the zombies. And that was a lot harder to hear. I think, when you have a tiny bit of hope in your heart for something and then that hope is destroyed utterly, it's really hard. And I'm very surprised at how hard it is. So I was not the only one that experienced this. She had a few other people that had loved ones that wanted to speak to them, but Mitch was the most insistent. He wanted to tell me that he was proud of all the stuff I'd been doing, which to me was wild because I'm doing the bare minimum to get by. We're all doing what we can to just survive. So it didn't seem like something to be proud of to me, but it's always good to hear that, you aren't messing things up as bad as you think you are. And a lot of other people had similar messages, proud of you, happy for what you're doing, happy that you're surviving, happy that you're continuing to fight back. Um, One of the weird things is all of them experienced right before they died. It said it felt like a fish hook came out of the sky and lodged in their brain, like an etheric one. Um, some people said fish hook, some people said it was like a claw attached to a wire, which makes me wonder back a while back. I had seen someone shooting at another and said that he was clawed. And, it was a woman. I was just like, okay, is this person like anti-trans? What's going on? Um, so anyway, I now wonder if clawed is a different term for the bitten, but it definitely raises questions as to, I've always felt like there was maybe a puppeteer or something like that going on. And it definitely makes that feeling I have a lot stronger. So anyway, one of the things that we plan on doing tonight is having a silent supper. Since so many of us were given confirmation that the loved ones that we had a glimmer of hope might survive did not, we figure a silent supper is you make food, obviously, and you create a plate for your loved ones. And then when you sit down to eat, um, some people set a place for their loved ones at the table with them. Some people apparently will just like put it at a separate table, like table for the dead. We're doing a they sit next to us kind of silent supper. And so then you don't speak through it. Everybody eats in silence. You're quiet as it goes on. The silent supper is silent. And it's a way of giving an offering to the dead as well as honoring them in your memories and your hearts. And yeah, that's what we're doing. And then when we're done with the silent supper, all of the food that we haven't eaten, we will be leaving out for the critters. We have coyotes and foxes and raccoons, and as always, multitude of birds, including turkey vultures and black vultures. So that will be what we do after the kids get all of their candy. And we have it set up inside where there's just different stations to simulate trick-or-treating. We're going to turn off all the lights. Our pumpkins are amazing this year. I mean, I say this year like we've had previous years, but this year they were amazing. So hopefully they're amazing every year. And so we have already gone through the trouble of making sure they have been carved into jack-o'-lanterns and everything like that. So we have all of these different tables set up throughout our compound where they can go and get a different trick-or-treating treat. So after we do that, um, we are after they go to bed, we put them to bed, and so after we put the children to bed, we will have the silent supper. And don't worry, we're not putting the kids to bed without feeding them. They will get their supper too. We just figured the silent supper, there's nothing more torturous for a child than giving them a bunch of sugar and then telling them to be quiet and sit still. Like, that just seemed like a cruelty. So we did not want to be cruel. And so what we are doing instead is once they go to bed, like around 9 or 10, we will have a couple of the people, a couple of the adults, I mean, watching over them and taking care of them because, there will be a sugar crash and it probably will not be pretty, but it's all part of the Halloween experience, right? So we'll have somebody there to make sure that they're going to bed and staying in bed and all of that because the silent supper is probably a bit too intense emotionally for them because you have to remember most of the people who came here with children, they are not their bio kids. They are kids they found or kids that found them. All of us have lost pretty much our entire families with a few very lucky exceptions. There's this group that travels from place to place where they've managed to keep their family intact, but they have done it by staying mostly on the move. Malcolm's sister, basically, and her whole group have managed. She and her wife are alive. Both of her kids are alive, but she is the exception, not the rule. The rule is most people barely survive when everybody else around them does not. And since that's the situation for pretty much everybody at the station, you know, um, we feel like the kids participating in the silent supper, it would be too emotionally devastating. And we want them to have as normal or as fun a Halloween as we can make it. Part of survival is finding moments of joy, finding happiness, finding fun things to do. Because, we're at the end of the growing season. We've done all of the work there. Um, and now we're in the dark of the year, Everybody's kind of depressed because the sun has gone away. It's getting colder. And, when it's summertime and you're too busy to really think about things too much, it goes by pretty quickly. But when you're inside and it's dark, it's a lot harder, and it's not like we're streaming things, it's very much if we've happened upon a DVD, we might watch it, but not like we can pick and choose what we use for entertainment. Other than books, we do have quite a variety of books. So we do have evening times. We have different people who take turns reading different books. But not every book appeals to everybody. We try to go with what the majority wants, but that, the majority is not everyone. So we have basically a rotation of readers and a rotation of books that we are going through. But that still leaves a lot of downtime to just think too much about what we've lost. And so I really feel like the medium showed up right at the correct time because all of our hearts were getting heavier anyway. You know, it was getting sadder for all of us anyway. So, yeah, that's where we are. Um, but Mitch did say that there were quite a few people in that encampment that I was at that he helped me escape from that did survive. And they went different directions. So I was not the sole survivor. I was one of maybe a handful. And it was really interesting to get intel about other settlements and other places from someone who's been dead for over a year. Um, yeah. So I'm just saying, life in the apocalypse is just wild. It is just wild. I never thought I would have a conversation with a medium telling me about my dead boyfriend. To be fair, I didn't think he was actually dead. I mean, I did and I didn't. Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. Um, and I guess the medium just opened the box for me. And if you're not familiar with Schrodinger's cat, it's a physics concept where anyway, you have a cat in a box that's either dead or alive, and it is in both states simultaneously until you open the box, basically, and find out which one it is. I don't know why he picked cat. It's metaphorical, not actual. At least if it's actual, please don't tell me. I do not want to know that they did an experiment with a cat. I know they have. I don't want to know about it. Um, so anyway, Schrodinger's boyfriend would mean he was both dead and alive in my brain until I got confirmation. And so the medium was very definitely confirmation about that. So that's fun. That's fun. But doing the Silent Supper, I think, will help. I think it will bring closure. Well, not closure. I don't know that you get closure when you've lost the entire world. I don't know that closure exists for the kind of loss that we're experiencing right now. I don't think there is closure for losing the world. I don't think there's closure for losing every single family member. There's endurance, there's survival. Um, you know, I once saw this cartoon where someone was talking about grief, and it was basically like a human form, and the grief was this large little round ball inside them, and they said, when grief first starts out, this is what it looks like. And you think, because you're told, oh, time heals all wounds, things get better, just give it more time, blah, blah, blah. So you think that this ball of grief inside of you shrinks. But what really happens is you grow larger around it. So the next clip is, the ball is the same size, but the human figure is bigger. And, when the ball is huge inside of you, it bounces against everything. Everything gets hit by this ball of grief. And that's really where most of us are right now. But with the second figure, you have grown around the grief big enough to where the ball, in comparison to you, is a lot smaller. So you can move around and it will still bump against things and cause that pain. But it causes it much more infrequently because there's more space within you for the grief to move. So that is where we are. That is where we are and what we're doing. Yeah. Yep. And, it's one of those where it's hard to even try and help counsel people through grief like this because we have all lost so much that even people because we do have a couple people, we have one or two that worked in that were social workers, but like they have masters and PhDs in social work, so they were counselors with social work. And we have at least one clinical psychologist, but they have experienced the same grief we have. And so they're good with giving us tools, but there's no professional counseling because they break down too. They're suffering the loss just like we are. And some of them are able to talk to 2 or 3 people in a day before they need a couple of hours to be upset themselves because their grief is fresh and raw. We're all experiencing the loss of most of the people we've ever loved, as well as the entire planet. Well, at least the US that we know of. And we know that there were zombies in the UK. We know that there were zombies in Australia. Like anything that was an island got hit with zombies first. I don't know what water has to do with it, but they came into the Midwest via Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, Lake Superior. All of those zombies came from the north. In Illinois, they first showed up basically in Chicago. So we know that water is part of it. Anyway, losing the entire world is a big deal. And my brain does that. I try to analyze the problem of the zombies, the origins of the zombies, and all of that. My brain goes to that first because it allows for a clinical detachment. I don't have to think about the fact that Mitch is gone, that my parents are gone, that my siblings are gone. And, their loved ones are gone. And we're not even going to talk about the nieces and nephews I've lost because we won't make it through this. But the important takeaway here is we all are surviving. We are doing our level best to survive. And it will be a generation or two before we have a world full of people that aren't just PTSD on legs, that aren't just walking grief, you know. Large parts of all of us have died in the zombie apocalypse, and who we are now is different people, you know. So it's a lot. It's very much a lot. And, that loss and that sadness is ever present. So we're hoping to start rituals like the Silent Supper and, like some other things to deal with this grief because we have to learn to grow around the grief and grow big enough that the grief isn't constantly messing us up, isn't constantly making us feel like things are pointless. Because that's one of the things, anybody who ever knew me is no longer on this planet. People who, and don't get me wrong, everybody here knows me. They know the post apocalyptic me. They don't know the me from before. Anybody who knew the me from before is just gone. They're just gone. Just like the world is gone. And that's really hard. That's really hard to wrap your head around. And it's really hard to deal with. So we're hoping that by having some rituals that we all participate in, where we all share our grief, where we are all connected through that grief, that we will all feel better, that we will all keep trucking. We will all keep fighting the good fight, that kind of thing. That's the plan. That is the goal. And, the kids that happen post-apocalypse are going to grow up in a world where their mortality rate is much higher. We don't have quite the access to medical care that we once did. We have the ever-present threat of zombies. We have weather that is no longer predicted. It just happens. There's a lot of worry over food. We live in a world where our mortality rate is going to be a lot higher, and that will be their normal. And we are hoping by having rituals that honor the dead, practices that keep the dead with us in a way where we can remember them, but also grow to accept life without them, that it will make it easier for them in the new world that we are building. But, right now, mainly we all just kind of want to cry. And that's fine. That's fine. Cry as much as you need to, be as sad as you need to. Just keep surviving. Anyway, today's transmission is going to be a little shorter because we do have the Silent Supper to get together. We all are dressing up in various costumes for the kids. It was amazing to come back home and see that they had made costumes already. They even had one for me. I'm going as a court jester. It's very bright and colorful. It's really pretty neat. So that portion should be really fun. And I'm hoping that the Silent Supper is healing or cathartic in some way. You never really heal from grief. Grief never goes away. It is always with you. It's always a part of you. But maybe by doing this silent supper and a few other things that we have planned for the future, we can integrate that grief into our normal lives. Because the truth of the matter is, none of us are going through this alone. None of us are on our own here. We have each other, and we have other survivors out there. So there is a lot of good still happening. There is a lot of good that will continue happening. And that's what we need to focus on and live for. So happy Halloween. And I hope you are surviving and surviving well. And keep in mind, no matter how hard things are, survive, survive, survive. This is Harper signing off for now. Remember, the world is still turning, even if it feels like we're standing still. Survive, adapt, endure. As the dust settles, we are rising again. We are rebuilding from the ashes. Until then, keep moving, keep fighting, and whatever you do, survive. Hello, listeners, and thank you for listening to the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio podcast. As I have stated a few times, we are moving to Substack. I was hoping to make this move on the 1st of January, but it looks like we will be making this move as of today. So we will still be on Podbean until November 5th, but then we will be on Substack. I appreciate you listening, and you can find us on Substack at ZASRs3e15 Survivor Radio. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you like our season finale.